can get started. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this masterclass on how to, research law firms effectively with BPP University. We've got an excellent panelist today and a lot to get through, so we hope you enjoy this masterclass and learn a lot about the process of researching. And so we always start our masterclasses with our learning outcomes. So by the end of this masterclass, you should, understand what good law firm research looks like. Build an efficient and sort of repeatable research process that works for you, spot meaningful differences between firms, and just in general feel more confident in turning law firm research into compelling applications.
All right, thank you. Right. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you are all well. Thank you for taking the time to join this session today. My name is Rutendo Zulu, and I am a careers consultant at BPP. My role is to help aspiring solicitors and law students generally kind of develop strategies, around, helping them understand how to kind of secure vacation schemes, training contracts, etc. So this session today, I'm hoping it'll be about 45 minutes. The aim for this session really is to try and get you as much information as possible to help guide you as much as I can. And we'll try and just kind of go through it as quickly as we can, because there is a lot of information to go through. There will be a point that you'll see me looking on the left when I'm kind of doing a demo. It's because I'm looking at my other screen. So just to kind of put that in there. So before we get started, so just to get started, I put yes in the chat if you've ever spent, hours and hours researching a firm and still kind of had no idea what to say, either in your application or in your interviews. So just give you a few seconds to just put either yes or no in the chat. Okay, thank you for doing that. So if you've put yes in the chat, it's not necessarily because you're bad at research. It's because no one really teaches you how lawyers do the research. So you kind of, you can kind of get lost with research, especially if there's a lot of information. So today is not really about giving you more information. It's about helping you to develop the judgment, because that's, it's more around, how do you judge what information is right? Because that's kind of what law firms are really testing and looking for. Okay, so moving on to our learning outcomes for today. So the learning outcomes for today, this session is designed, is kind of designed to change how you research. It's not necessarily just about where you look, but how you kind of, how you maneuver your research. By the end of the session, you should feel a little bit more clearer, calmer, and a bit more confident. Hopefully you will know what to focus on, what sort of information you should be ignoring, and how to turn research into strong answers. And my aim here is to also just give you some really good examples to give you an idea of when you do research, how are you responding in an application? And obviously, as you can see on the screen, just understanding what law firms are testing, when they ask why this firm, I'll also give you an example of how to respond to that. Research firms in a way that shows judgment and not necessarily about you memorizing the information. Also, it's about knowing how much research is enough and when to stop, because sometimes you can find yourself doing research for so long that you now have too much information that can then get overwhelming. So what we want to do is move away from that and focus on just really condensing how much information you're taking in and just not trying to learn everything. I see that with some of my students, that they're trying to kind of spend hours and hours and they want to get as much as they can. That's not necessarily what it is about. We will also have to be smart about it, because when you think about it, especially when you're applying for training contracts and vacation schemes, these applications take a long time. So you really want to use a strategy that allows you to spend less time researching and getting the most out of the research that you're doing in a short space of time. And then some of the things that we'll be doing is like showing you, I'll do a bit of a demo of like a website that is really good, that you can see kind of information that's there. Today, we won't have time to go into detail, but I really encourage you to just spend some time, go away and have a look by yourself and just kind of, maneuver around that kind of website, see what the information that is there. Okay. So the harsh truth about law firm research. What I have found, especially when looking at reviewing applications, is that most research is not necessarily useful. And what tends to happen is that, recruiters are able to spot very quickly when someone's just kind of picked up research and just kind of thrown in information. I see this a lot where people take in, maybe they've read, a recent case and they just take things word by word and just copy and paste it. We want to move it away from that. We want to move away from telling the law firms about themselves and, focusing on really just kind of producing a really good application. And the uncomfortable truth is most of the research that students tend to do, doesn't necessarily help them in their interviews or applications. I've seen students with pages and pages of notes, color-coded documents, tabs are open everywhere, and they're still struggling to answer, the basic question of why this law firm. That's because they, and then I think that's kind of because recruiters aren't impressed by volume. It's not necessarily about volume. They're looking for insight. They hear the same answers over and over again, and they can tell instantly when someone hasn't actually filtered or kind of interpreted what they've found in that information. So we want to, you don't necessarily need more information. What you need is better judgment, and that's kind of what the focus will be today. Okay, so where do we start? We're asking yourself, okay, I'm ready to do my research. I am ready to, I want to apply. So the example we're using today is Freshfields. So that's purely because I think the information on there is really, really good. So I want to use that as kind of the baseline. But where do I start? Before you research any law firm, uh, you know, you need to research yourself. Before you open any website, I want you to pause and think to yourself, okay, what is it? You want to kind of ask some of these questions that you can see on the screen. One of the biggest mistakes, students make is jumping straight into firm research without knowing what they're really looking for. And that's how you end up saying things like, I like your culture and global reach, sorry, because you haven't necessarily defined your own criteria. So let's break this down. So one question, what motivates you? One of the things I want you to think about is, think about, the times at university when you felt fully engaged. Maybe there's a module that you were doing that you felt fully engaged. Maybe you picked up some pro bono work experience, and you felt like time was flying by and you were looking forward to that, or maybe projects that you genuinely care about. So this is what you want to think about. What motivates me? Is it like responsibility? Is it pressure? Is it deadlines? Is it complex cases? Or is it just, seeing quick, tangible outcomes? This matters because different firms reward different types of motivation. So it's really important that you understand yourself, what really motivates you. And then the next one is, what problems do I like solving? Not all legal work feels the same. And I think it's really important for me to say this because I think people don't necessarily think of it like that. They just think I'm just going to apply everywhere because you might be that student that has had so many rejections. So you're like, okay, I'm just going to apply everywhere. We want to kind of move away from that. You want to think to yourself, okay, what problems do I like to solve? You want to ask yourself this question: do I like complex, technical problems that take time to unravel? Do I prefer maybe high profile, urgent matters? Or, do I want work that's tangible and transactional, or maybe more advisory? And then you want to think of, maybe am I drawn to maybe local impact, or am I drawn to like global issues? So, for example, Freshfield suits people who enjoy complex, they enjoy high stakes. You also enjoy long hours. I think that's one of the things that people don't think about. When you think about Magic Circle law firms, they don't think about the fact that actually I'm going to be working like late a lot. So you want to be someone that's, kind of excited by that, complex, it's fast paced, there's high stakes in that work that you're doing. And if those things, you tick all those things, then obviously that environment is right for you. But if it doesn't, that's not a failure. It's also just useful information to know. And then the next one is, what type of work environments suits me? This one is important because you want to be honest with yourself. This part is not necessarily about being aspirational. It's about being honest with yourself. So here I want you to think, okay, do I like team-based work? Do I like large trainee intakes, or do I like kind of smaller cohorts? Do I like multiple offices or just having one main base? Am I somebody that likes structured training versus learning on the job? Some firms suit people who thrive in big, fast-paced environment, like I mentioned before, like Freshfields. Others suit people, who want closer supervision. You want maybe smaller teams. Neither is better. They're just different. So you have to find what works for you. And lastly, it's about, what lifestyle do I want? This one, it gets ignored so much more than you realize. People don't really think about, okay, what type of lifestyle do I actually want? You want to ask yourself, number one, where do I want to live? Number two, how important is work-life balance to me? If you care about work-life balance, Magic Circle and City law firms are not going to be for you because you're not going to get work-life balance. How do I feel about long hours? What role does money realistically play in this situation? Do I care more about having more money but less time for myself? So these are some of the things that you want to think about. You don't need perfect answers. What you just need is just honesty, being honest with yourself. Once you've answered all these questions, firm research becomes a little bit more easier. You then stop asking, why do people apply here? And you start asking, why does this firm make sense to me? Is this a firm that makes sense for me and all the things that I want? So I want you to start there before you do any type of research. These are some of the things that I want you to think about. Okay, next one. So here we're going to start with a quick test, right? This test this could be about any firms. I've written this answer. So I am, a law student and I'm writing my vacation scheme application, and I'm attracted. This is my answer that I write, and you're reading it for me, you're proofreading it for me. And I write, I'm attracted to the firm's strong culture, global reach, and commitment to excellence. The question I want to ask you is, could this apply to more than one firm? In the chat, put yes or no. Just give you a few seconds to do that. Okay, I can see people putting things in the chat. Thank you. Okay, so if your answer could apply to 5, 10, or every firm on lawcareers.net, for example, then it does not necessarily demonstrate choice. And firms want candidates who have chosen them deliberately. And this is back to that conversation that I was having before, where, I speak to so many students where, they're at a place where they've had so many rejections, and they're now at a place where they're like saying, okay, I'm just going to apply to as many law firms as I can. What is going to happen is you're going to find yourself in this situation where you're writing a response that could be for any law firm, and recruiters will spot that very quickly. And even for me, when I review applications, I can spot really quickly whether someone is passionate about a practice area, whether they're passionate about the law firm. It's really clear. I can tell the difference between an application of someone that has done the research. I'm not talking, when I speak about research, I'm not speaking only for, just the law firm's website. I'm talking about so much more research, and I'll speak a bit more in detail around some of that other research that you get to do outside of the law firm. So this answer is a generic one, and it could really apply to any law firm because, any law firm that has a global reach, it can apply to that law firm. So we want to move away from these generic application responses. Okay, so here I'm going to show you what effective research looks like, and I'll explain to you why it's effective. So effective research is I've written a response for a law firm specifically. What particularly attracted me to Freshfields was how consistently the firm emphasizes exposure to complex matters early on, especially in areas like investigations and disputes, where trainees are trusted to take on real responsibility rather than just observe. That hands-on approach is exactly how I learn best. So what makes this effective? So first of all, it focuses on trainee experience, not just marketing slogans. This person has noticed that Freshfields repeatedly talks about early responsibility, involvement in live matters, and learning through doing. Secondly, it links that directly how best the candidate works. So you're someone that works well under all of this. You work really well. So what they're not saying is, I want responsibility because it sounds impressive. What they're saying is, this structure suits the way I learn. That shows self-awareness, which firms value hugely. So you have self-awareness. Your response wants to show that you have uh, self-awareness. And finally, this answer couldn't be, lifted and dropped into any other law firm without sounding wrong. So, so let's say we went on the Freshfields website, you see that one of their practice areas is investigations and disputes. So it's really clear, and you see this information. If you go on their website and you go on the early careers, you'll be able to pick up some of these themes coming up. So that's what you want to do. So yeah, so this is that's the test: writing an effective application response that is specifically for that law firm and what they talk about, whether it's on their website, whether it is what people talk about on LinkedIn. Really clear. You've done the effective research, and now you've kind of taken that research and put it in your answer in a way that is also just quite personal to you as well. Okay, so if your research doesn't help you answer these four questions, it won't help you in either your interviews or your application. So notice what's not here is history, awards list, office location. Those are just background noise. These questions force you to, prioritize and connect the firm to your motivation. So let's look at the questions. These are questions that you want to think about. Where does the firm really make money? And another one I want you to think about as well is, okay, they may have a practice area that probably is their main focus, but if this practice area didn't work out, for example, like if things are not working out in a practice area, how else do they then make money? What other things can they tap into to make money? You want to be really analytical when you're looking at your research. The next one is, what do their lawyers actually do on a day-to-day? What is their role? And that's, when you're thinking about doing your research, for example, those are some of the questions that I want you to think about. What's changing for the firm right now? There's a lot of changes happening. You'll be able to see, especially on Freshfields, you'll be able to see that, there is a lot happening there in terms of even just like AI and just there are a lot of changes. There's a lot of news on there as well. So these are some of the things that you want to think about. And then the last one is, why does that make sense for me? Again, you see how I'm kind of bringing it back to you, because it's really important for you to think about how, this kind of ties into it. Because, when you have an interview, for example, it's not necessarily about just them learning about you. It's also about you learning whether that environment is right for you. And I think that's really important to think about both sides. Because I think sometimes when we're preparing for applications, or we're preparing for interviews, for example, we spend a lot of time thinking, okay, how can that benefit them? But how does it benefit me? Is this environment right for me? Are the people that are interviewing me, are they, would that work for, how I like to work? So those are some of the things that you want to think about. But yeah, I want you to think, when you're thinking about this question, these questions here, sorry, I want you to think about, prioritization, you know, how does the firm connect the connection to your motivation as well, and then lastly, how do I interpret this information? So these are some of the questions that if you're stuck and you're thinking, okay, I'm not really sure where to go here, this is what I want you to think about. Okay, so now we are here where I am going to take some time to show you very quickly. We're not going to have time to go into detail around it, but I will show you Freshfield's website. And what I want you to think about here is, I want you to think about this research. We're going to go through it really quickly. We'll look at when you look at the homepage, for example, we're skimming through the homepage. The first place you want to look at is you start with early careers. Why do we start with early careers? Because, you know, it's not necessarily about, it's more about you. Early careers is about you because, when you look at the website, for example, you're scanning and you're looking, what do I need to know first? I need to know, the trainees. Does this work for me? How many trainees they have in a cycle, all of this information. But bear with me a second. I am going to get this information over for you and then we can. All right. So we are on the Freshfields website, and on there you can see. So we just, you can watch the video. I watched the video a few times, but ultimately we're just skimming through. Okay, what information is on the homepage? If you can see, there's a lot of information here. Really, really good information. They talk about their capabilities. They talk about their locations. But where we're going to go is we're going to go to your career. We're going to go here. And then if you can see, so here they talk about, law students again. So now we want to be on early careers. Just skimming through again. Okay, opportunities. You get to see like different opportunities in different places. Let me just go back to the early careers bit, right? So, right, it's not allowing me. Bear with me a second. So here you can see some of this information. So I want you to think about, okay, what is standing out the most for me here? What am I seeing? Like I said, I'm just showing you some of the things that I got to see. Really quick information. And it takes you back to, let's go back to your career. And then we get to see whatever stage you're at. So here it shows you, and then and then yeah, and then you get to see. So we pick, for example, we pick United Kingdom. Now we get to see the early opportunities. So early career opportunities in the UK, starting there. So they show you vacation schemes. They tell you the trainee associate program, and then they tell you what to expect. So you can see really good information. There's L&D, mentoring, and supervision, health and well-being. So if you can see, there's so much information. AI, innovation and AI comes up, as if you can see, it's coming up here, and we're on early careers. And when I went on other pages, that's one thing I noticed as well. They were talking about AI. If you can see practice areas, so you can see all these practice areas. So earlier I was speaking to you about investigations. So you can see there's so much information here. So let's say we come on here and there's maybe less information than maybe investigations. That tells you what you need to know. But I just wanted to show you this so you can see this is a website that has so much information. We will get websites where there is just not that much information, and that's okay. We could talk about where else you can look if there's not enough information. But yeah, I just wanted to show you this. I wanted you to see, if you can see, there's so much information here. But if you're starting off, go to early careers first. Go and learn, what the expectations are. People sometimes ask me, oh, my A-level grades are not, at AAA, for example. And if Freshfields, they'll tell you, what they're looking for. I know Slaughter and Mate are very clear on A-levels. So you can look at that and you can see what the entry requirements are. Just really important to learn about that first before you start looking at other things. So I wanted to bring your attention to that. And then now we'll just go back to the slides. Just bear with me a second. Okay. All right. So we're back to the slides now. So yeah, so here I wanted to just take time to show you, some of the things that I want you to think about. But, I think here when we focus on the early careers, I think why early careers is important is because that's the part that's actually written for you. It's not written to impress, because websites, let's be honest, especially law firm websites, are there to kind of impress, you know, potential clients, so they want it to be really impressive. So, but if you go on that kind of early careers, this tells you, how the firm wants trainees to develop, what skills they actually care about, what kind of people they're trying to attract. They're very clear with that, even in the entry requirements, really clear. So when you're scanning through, you're scanning for words like responsibility, collaboration, exposure, how early they actually talk about client work, whether they actually emphasize structure or autonomy. So these are some of the things you want to think about. You want to pay attention to if for example, if a phrase appears on the careers page, in trainee testimonials or in the firm insights, Freshfield's examples to look for. So, we spoke about this before. So things like high stakes, collaboration, etc., international teams, they're in international law firms. You saw all the areas kind of like they kind of are based. So these are some of the things I want you to think about. But some of the key things: look for repeated language, follow what the firm is emphasizing. Technology, is the technology coming up a lot? When you watch that advert, you want to be really analytical. What are they trying to kind of show me here? What are they trying to, kind of make it really clear that they, if there's an area that they spend more time writing about, there's something about that area, you go and do a little bit more research. And I think what's important is, I think a lot of students, this is where they go wrong, because a lot of students, where they go wrong is they're not looking at what the firm wants from them first of all before you do anything else. I think people are just clicking everything because they're curious. It's not necessarily about curiosity. What you want to show is which practice areas, like I said before, get detailed explanations, which ones are brief, which ones are linked to maybe current issues. If a firm spends maybe like 3 paragraphs on investigations and 2 lines on something else, that tells you what matters to them right now. So, I'm not asking what do they do. What the ask is, what are they drawing your attention to? That's what you want. What is being drawn attention to? So, and when you go through, let's say I only had like, I don't know, an hour. I'm not going to learn everything about fresh foods in an hour, but what you want to pick out is 3 to 4 strong insights, language that you can reuse carefully, obviously, and enough understanding to answer why this firm convincingly. How do you convince them that actually why this firm? So really important. Okay. So that the research that most students never do. This is where, your research becomes more lawyer level. So you are someone that's going beyond the website. Who gets quoted in the press? What are the partners talking about repeatedly? Which areas are loud and which areas are quiet? Because, with a law firm like that, for example, if they have so many areas, there is no way they're going to go into detail about every area. There are areas that are going to stand out. That's just the reality of that. And one thing I want you to think about is, silence is information. So if there's not enough information about an area, that is clear for you to just know that silence is information. And yeah, who speaks for the firm? You want to look at that. When we went on the website really quickly, we could see some of the key people that were kind of on there in different countries, what they don't say, because there are things that they don't say, but I'll go into a little bit more detail. We want to look at external, and that's why it's really important to just go beyond just the website. We want to look at, okay, where else can we look that we can get more realistic information that's not necessarily there to just impress you. Okay. The next one is when the website is not enough, we're going to go beyond it. This is here where I spoke about earlier when, the website goes quiet, we have to look in other places. Sometimes you'll find that you're not going to find a law firm that has everything. For example, Freshfields has so much information, but there are law firms that they just don't put that much information on there, and they don't really talk about any cases. I get this question from students all the time. What do I do when there's not enough information? You know, and I want to reiterate what I said before earlier. Firm websites are designed to, they're designed to make everything look impressive, not to tell you what actually really matters. And sometimes, especially with like smaller firms or even newer practices, the website just doesn't give you that much. That's not necessarily a dead end. It's just a signal for you to look elsewhere. So when that happens, when you find yourself, you're like, okay, I'm just not getting enough information on this website. I want you to shift your focus. What does the firm, what does the firm say about itself? So you're focusing from what does the firm say about itself to what does the world say about this firm, and what does the choose firm choose to say publicly, because there are things that they will just naturally choose to be a little bit more public with. So I want you to now, so we're now going beyond the website. Okay, where do we look when we're deciding to go beyond the website? So we're going to look at legal directories, right? So things like Chamber Student, Legal 500. So so what are you looking for when you get to these places? Because I don't want to leave you again feeling a little bit lost. So what are we looking for? So some of the things we're looking for is descriptions for work types, not just rankings, codes about how teams operate, client or competitor commentary. So this is what we want to think about. Directories. So these legal directories aren't just about prestige. They tell you what work actually keeps the firm busy. That's what it tells you. And then after that, when you've looked at some of these legal directories that I mentioned, now we're going to lawcareers.net. Really good. They have firm profiles. They have a really good setup that I really like and I send students to all the time, where they have training contract deadlines. And on there, you get to also see law firms. You get to meet law firms that you have not necessarily ever heard of before. So when you look at a firm profile, so we pick a law firm that is, maybe a different law firm that is not necessarily one that you hear about all the time. VWV, for example. So what do you look for? So some of the things you look for when you're reading the profiles, you're looking for training numbers. What is the structure of their, training? Are there any recurring themes, in testimonials that, kind of maybe trainees have left or people that have done, vacation schemes with them, what they've left. I think this is far more honest than what actually the firm website will say, because it's actually written for candidates and not necessarily clients. So, places like LCN, they're not writing for clients, they're writing for students. So here you'll be able to get information that is a little bit more, different to what you might actually pick up on the website. And then next, we're now looking at where else do we look? Okay, so we've looked at legal directories. We've looked at maybe firm profiles on lawcareers.net. Okay, where else do we look for? Okay, we look for press coverage and firm insights. So where do we look for that? Some of the places to look, Financial Times is a good one. The Lawyer is a good one. LinkedIn posts by partners is a good one. Also, even trainees, to be honest, really good. Try and get some information from there. And then obviously, the obvious one is, going back to the firm website, looking at news, looking at insights, things like that are really important. Okay, so when we're looking on maybe, I don't know, Financial Times or The Lawyer, what do we look for? So we're looking for what issues keep reappearing, how the firm positions itself in response to change. So if there's any change happening, I remember there was a time around sustainability, how is the firm positioning itself, even with AI as well, how are they positioning it themselves and how are they responding to change that is happening? So some law firms have their own AI that they've kind of introduced. So things like that. And then we're now moving away from, so to recap, we have now covered, obviously we've covered the website itself. We've covered legal directories like Legal 500 and Chamber Student. We've done lawcareers.net. We've done that. We've done, the Lawyer, Financial Times, LinkedIn posts. And then now we're going to come back to LinkedIn now, which I think is usually underused. So what do we search for? When you're searching to get information, just trying to give you some keywords to think about. So the firm name. So let's say we're using Clifford Chance, for example, and trainee, right? Plus trainee. Firm name plus partner. The partner thing is really good because you can look on the website to see the different partners and you can put their name, the law firm and the name, or firm name plus recent events. So this is how, if you are thinking to yourself, okay, how do I use LinkedIn? This is kind of just giving you some ideas of how to do it. And some of the things you want to notice and pay attention to when you're doing this research on LinkedIn, for example, what are people celebrating? What they comment on, what is it that is getting repeated? Because you'll find that with a lot of law firms, there are things that will get repeated by different, trainees, different partners. You see things, themes. You start to pick up some themes from there as well. So you'll be able to see that as well. And then the next one, the last one, which is kind of events, webinars, open days, even looking at recordings as well. So these are some of the things that other ways of getting information. So looking to attend open days, looking to attend any webinars that they have. I know lawcareers.net will show you events as well. If law firms are hosting events, attending some of those, if there are any webinars, attending some of those. And when you're kind of attending these, what do you focus on? So the main focus is things like how lawyers talk about their work, what excites them, what they mention about, what they actually mention without being prompted. You can always tell. I think that's one thing, you'll be able to tell what they're really passionate about as well. And you can tell. I think that's where you want to be paying attention to some of those themes, especially, and that's why attending events, attending open days is really important, because it kind of gives you a chance to kind of get that insight that you would not necessarily get from all the other sources that I've mentioned before. And what people mention casually is actually often more revealing than what's actually on the slides. So, they may mention something casually and you think to yourself, oh, I wonder what that gets mentioned. Let me just keep that in mind and do any other research. And, as a student, what you should be asking yourself, what students should be asking themselves while doing this is, okay, I'm looking, you know, you're looking, as you look beyond the website, what does the firm keeps talking about? What feels strategically important, and what does that tell me about, the work and the people? And I think this one is really important. When you attend even these events, or if you're doing kind of research on testimonials and etc., I think what you really want to do is, I think the people is also really important. What's the culture like? What is it like working, in different teams, asking the right questions and knowing, especially when you attend some of these, you know, these events, I think it's really important to know to ask the right questions. And having this information now, I hope that it will be able to help you to start to think about some of these things, and how you can benefit. And the next one, and then lastly, if the firm doesn't give you much information, that doesn't necessarily mean you're stuck. It just means it's an opportunity to show judgment by by choosing what to focus on and why, and picking up the little bits of information that you can get and just making the most out of that information as well. Okay, so I remember, I think at the beginning I mentioned that I was going to give you examples, and I wanted to give you some of those examples and explain to you why kind of the examples have been chosen. So instead of saying I'm interested in your corporate practice, how about you try something along the lines of, what stood out to me was how often partners talk about working closely with founders rather than large PLCs. That early exposure is exactly what I'm looking for. So this is the difference between sounding polished and sounding real. The second answer shows that what the second answer actually shows you. Sorry, I'll come back to the first answer actually. First answer, again, is very generic. Based on what we spoke about before, I'm sure you can now tell, kind of generic. So this one tells you, what the first one is quite generic. Could, if if for example, there's another law firm, it can be used for any law firm really. So what the second answer does is it shows you notice something specific, and it links back to you as well. And that's really important because it's also about you. They're trying to get to know you on your, when you, especially if it's an application form, for example, um, you know, they're trying to get to know you. And I think what I want you to keep in mind is recruiters remember answers like this because they do sound human. I think that answers like this you want to sound human. I think with AI as well, I'm seeing this thing where people want to sound so polished that it kind of moves away from you, your personality, your authentic tone, and it's now kind of just too polished and it just doesn't, your own voice is missing. And again, with AI, you do have to be really strategic, especially if the law firm is encouraging people to use AI. I think sometimes it does sound polished and you don't want that. You want it to sound like you, with your authentic tone and voice as well. Okay, the next one, I'm going to go through this quite quickly because I'm aware that our time is running out. So the first answer is I'm attracted to firm global research, strong culture and commitment to excellence. And then here, the other one will be, what stood out to me was Freshfield's focus on complex cross-border matters, particularly in competition and investigations where teams collaborate across jurisdiction. That international exposure is exactly what I'm looking for in my training. So it goes back to you. It's very specific to them, because you have done the time to look at, okay, what do they do? You've done the research. So, again, the answer is for the same firm, same interest. It's just a completely different signal. This one is polished, is very personal. It just doesn't apply to any law firm, for example. Okay, so here, how much research is enough? I think here is the point where I want to give you this time to stop over researching. If you're spending 5 hours researching one firm, that's not necessarily preparation. That's more like avoidance. What we want to do is, strong research will look at 3 to 4 solid insights, that are used confidently, explained clearly. So you learn to be strategic. And I think all of this is very much practice. You practice, you learn how to pick out information. Think about if you're researching on something that you're really interested in. Maybe you're interested in like, there's a business that you're interested in, or maybe I don't know, maybe there's like the gym, for example. You're not gonna, if you're trying to maybe be in the gym more, you're not gonna spend hours and hours and hours. You're gonna try and be really time efficient in what you're looking for, picking up the right information and using that information, as much as possible when you're doing kind of your applications. So 60 to 90 minutes. Again, this is very much different for everyone. I think I do know that for some people, especially when you're getting started, you know, if I say to someone spend an hour and a half, for example, on research, that might not be enough for them and how they process information. So I think the whole point here is to just give you a bit of a guideline, but ultimately do what is right for you, but do not spend a whole day. I had a student say to me, "Oh, I spent a whole day doing research on this law firm," and I said, "You're wasting time, because if you want to be efficient in kind of your applications, and if you want to kind of spend more time doing applications, you do not need to spend the whole day, because you're wasting time, especially if you've got other things you're studying, you've got other things going on. Just be a little bit more strategic in how you approach your research." Okay, you don't need to know everything about the firm. And I think that's something that comes up a lot, with a lot of the students that I talk to. You don't need to know everything about the firm, because what law firms aren't necessarily testing your memory. They're testing how you actually think and how you also process the information that you've learned. So how am I processing the information? And they can tell, I think, I'm someone that has definitely shortlisted applications before. You can always tell how someone thinks when you read their application. So I think that's why it's important as well to have your applications reviewed. If you have like any careers consultants, or in your university, get someone else to look at your application. I think it's really good, because you get to learn a lot as well, I think. And also just, I think, I think you don't want to spend time memorizing, especially when people are preparing for interviews as well. People feel like they need to know everything. That's not realistic for anyone. You can't know everything. It's impossible. It's just, it's about, they want to know your thought process, how you think. And that's why in an interview, I might ask you, why this firm, but I'm going to do follow-up questions as well. And those follow-up questions are to try and learn about, testing how you think as a person, how you process things, and how you maybe tackle when, issues arise. So some of those things, really important to think about. Okay. The final reality check. Firms aren't testing your memory, like I said, they're testing your thinking. Good research isn't necessarily about it being impressive because it's detailed. It's more about being selective. Your goal is not to sound impressive, it's to sound specific. And then using research properly, I'm going to go really quickly because I know that we're running out of time. Using research properly, applications versus interviews. So, in applications, students would tend to ask me, why did my application get through, but my interview didn't? So, just to explain a little bit briefly, in applications, research is doing one job. It proves that you've researched the firm deliberately, whereas recruiters want to see clarity, focus, and evidence that you didn't just apply blindly. So, specific matters. Specific. I can't even talk. Being specific matters here. So in applications, strong research sounds like I chose this firm because. In interviews, strong research will sound something like what interested me was, dot 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 because that made me think dot dot dot. In interviews, in interviews, the job of research changes. Interviews are not checking, whether you've memorized the facts. They already know that you can do the research. You've proved that, you proved that by getting the interview. What they want to see now is how does this person interpret information, how you explain your thinking, and whether you can discuss rather than just recite what you've learned, basically. And that's the reason why interviews tend to feel harder. Sorry. That's the reason why interviews tend to feel harder because many interviews answer, many interview answers fail, not necessarily because the research is wrong, but because it's delivered like an application answer, and you don't want that. But yeah, so that's that in a nutshell. I didn't want to spend too much time because we are running out of time, but this is just to close up, what recruiters are saying. They can spot these kind of generic applications quite instantly. You can see some of these, they remember the people that connect genuinely. So connection is really important. We spoke about connecting. And I think when I mentioned LinkedIn, it's good to connect. Try your best to connect. Sometimes it's not easy. You don't always get a response. Try your best to do what you can, go into open days, etc., because they will remember you if you're someone that's going to make yourself stand out. And then lastly, I wanted to just leave you with this last one, which is why this firm. I think I mentioned to you why. I want to mention to you earlier that I would kind of give you an example. I think it's just kind of like a strong answer. And what this answer does is it focuses on, forward thinking, not just being descriptive. It focuses on maybe client problems, not firm marketing. And it's more grounded in context as well. Notice again what's missing: no excellent reputation, no generic global reach, or any kind of buzzwords in there. Instead, what it does is shows you that candidate understands what pressures clients are facing, how Freshfields positions itself in response, for example. So yeah, I'm not going to read it for you this time because we are just running out of time. But this is a really good one for you to, if you're just kind of feeling like stuck, this is maybe, you can take a picture of like, if I was answering this question, which is not an easy one to answer as well, how would I approach it? And this is one way to approach it without sounding generic. And lastly, thank you so much for joining today. I'm sorry, I was trying to cover as much as we can. And I think one thing I want you to remember is judgment is what makes research persuasive. So you don't need more information. You just need better selection. And I wish you all the best if you've got any applications coming up. I wish you all the best. And lastly, remember, quality beats quantity every single time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we have a few minutes for maybe to address a couple of audience questions, if that's okay. We did go over AI. Someone has asked, we kind of looked at some websites addressing AI and innovation and stuff, but the person is asking, what are law firms' attitudes to, using AI in applications?
Okay, so law firms are different. It's a very interesting question. Thank you for asking that question. So law firms are different. There are some law firms that I'm seeing it change more and more. They actually allow you to use AI now. Some of the law firms, they're very much encouraging you to use AI. Or some of the questions that come up, there's a question that comes up more is like, they are very much about AI. How do you use AI? How do you use AI if you've used it in this application? And I've noticed people will write things like for proofreading. So I think there is a positive in terms of AI. And I think it's really important that you know how to navigate AI because things are changing. And a lot of these law firms are actually kind of using AI as well. So just having that knowledge. What you don't want to do, which is very obvious, is to use AI to write your applications for you because that's going to kind of be very obvious. So yeah, in a nutshell, I think a lot of law firms are a lot more positive about you using AI, but AI is not designed for you to use to write your applications for you.
Thank you very much. And I have also, for the attendees, I've also popped in the chat an article from LCN we have about using AI in law firm applications. If anyone's interested, do you have a read of that? I did see a question about can you use the information from LCN in an application? Maybe I can start that one because I'm representing LCN. Definitely, 100%. And please do. We highly recommend it. And so do recruiters. So just to quickly overview, we do a lot of interviews with legal professionals from different positions. For example, we interview recruiters from law firms. We recruit. No, we don't recruit. We interview lawyers and the people that have done vacation schemes, and we ask them stuff about the firm, what kind of work they do, what on the recruiter side, what they kind of expect on applications, how to stand out. So if you have firms that you've shortlisted, you can always check them on LC and see if we have content with them. And yeah, we definitely recommend using those information from there, then picking it out, specific details that resonate with you and putting it in your applications, but also sessions like these. We also do exclusive sessions with law firms themselves on different practice areas. And the panelists always say when their attendees ask them about advice, and what kind of things to talk about in applications, the panelists always say to mention the LCN events that people attend. So 100%. And if you haven't looked at our website, please do. There's a lot on there. There's a question from Imogen asking if they spend 60 to 9 minutes researching the firm, for example, how long should they then spend on their application?
I think your application is very much a personal thing. I would not necessarily say, so for example, some people will spend maybe the whole day working on an application. And also, I think it depends on, how many questions are there. I'm seeing some law firms are doing less and less questions where they'll probably say 2 or 3 questions, 250 words each. So it depends. Whereas I've seen law firms that will ask 3 questions, 500 words each. That's going to take you a long time. And to be honest with you, I think what I want you to focus on is quality, as opposed to, okay, how long, as you do more applications, you'll find that you spend less time on your applications. But initially, if you're getting started, you should be spending a little bit more time on your application. I think the more time, the better in terms of just making it as good as you can make it. I think focus on quality before you start worrying about kind of the time frames. And it's very much personal because some people do applications in between other things. They have classes. So it's very much, unless if you're someone that's just spending the day, doing an application, you might be able to finish the application in one day. But if you're someone that has other responsibilities, then it's going to take you longer.
Perfect, thank you. And I have seen in the chats and in the questions that we do have some international students also joining, which is very interesting. And I did link in the chat an international student feature that I've done for LCN if anyone's interested in reading that. But Simran said that there are students studying outside the UK but hoping to pursue a legal career there. So in the UK, and how should they approach researching UK law firms? Would the approach differ?
No, the approach doesn't differ. I am actually currently working with students that are based, distance learners that are based in other countries, and the approach that I'll give them is exactly the same thing. The only difference is you might not be able to attend like in person open days, but everything else is the same. LCN, the firm's website, legal directories, everything still remains the same. LinkedIn, I think you still use the same approach. The only difference is going to be the open days. But if like LCN has like events online, you should still be attending those events if you can. So everything still remains the same. The difference is if there's any in-person events, you won't be able to attend those.
Yeah, no, 100% echo that. And I think a lot of law firms have also doing a lot of virtual open days and insight schemes like that. So the options are still very similar, and I'll say the approach is the same. And another person has asked if they don't necessarily have the entry requirements for the law firm, for example, ABB, when it requires AAB, is it still worth, applying, or does it depend on the firm?
So this one is an interesting one, right? Because it depends. I think a lot of Magic Circle law firms, I know for sure, I think Slaughter MA is quite specific on that. And I've had students ask me the same question, and I'll say, if you can prove, so if it is just A levels, for example, let's say it's A levels, they want you to have AAA, but everywhere else you've kind of excelled, then I'll say still apply. You lose nothing from applying, because you might also, I think your A level results don't necessarily have to define you. You might be someone that's picked up a lot of experience. You might be someone that's done exceptionally well in your degree. But what they do want to see, they care about, especially law firms that are Magic Circle, we cannot run away from the fact that they care about grades. And I think that's something that I will tell to students, that they care about grades, and we can't run away from that. But I think if I won't say don't apply. I wouldn't say that. Use your discretion. But I'll say to you, if, for example, they want AAA and you've got 3 Cs, then you do have to question whether you should be applying. You should probably want to be looking at your other option. There is also that thing where sometimes, and a lot of the time actually, they will ask you if you didn't get the grades that you wanted. It's a question that comes up on applications. Were there any exceptional circumstances? If you're someone that had those exceptional circumstances, I know people will be like, oh, if it comes across as I'm feeling sorry for myself. No, it's the reality of what happened. If you've got things that have happened during your exams, do not shy away from using that, because I promise you people use it and it's helped them. So if you've got exceptional circumstances, put them in there. But ultimately, I think if the requirements are really strict and you're far away from those, then you kind of want to be, you do kind of maybe look at where it's not as competitive, because the reality of these firms that won maybe 3 A's or A, B, 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 for example, they are going to be really competitive. So you're better off putting yourself in a position where you can actually kind of have a chance, as opposed to it being just completely competitive.
Perfect. Thanks so much for that answer as well. And I think this is all we've got time for this session. But to our attendees, before you go, just another reminder that we'll be sending out a link containing the recorded session. So please keep an eye out for that. There'll also be a survey popping up once this masterclass is ended. So please fill that in to let us know how you enjoyed today, and then what other topics you'd like us to see cover in the future. And again, remember to also check out all our upcoming events that I mentioned earlier on the events page on LawCraze.net, including the other 2 masterclasses that we have with BPP in February and March. And also remember to post about this masterclass on LinkedIn. Thank you very much once again to our panelists and to everyone attending today. We hope you enjoyed, and we look forward to seeing you again next time. Thank you.
Thank you.